I'm Jeff Paur, senior writer with RealTime Fantasy Sports. Welcome to the RealTime Fantasy Sports Show. It is Tuesday morning and time for our wavering video we do every week, and I'm going to be joined now by Evan Webb, contributing writer with RealTime Fantasy Sports. Evan, thanks so much for joining me once again. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, Jeff.
Yeah, a little interesting week. We had a couple injuries that are kind of opening the door for some playing time, so I think the waiver wire might be a little busier this week than past weeks.
Yeah, especially before the playoffs are starting, everybody's trying to fill their rosters and get them right before the playoffs start. So yeah, it's a big week this week.
It's never too early to plan ahead as well when it comes to playoffs.
Right.
So if you're like streaming defenses or anything like that, and you looking for some good matchup, you got some free bench spaces, I would consider doing that because I think a lot of other owners are probably thinking along those same lines as well. So don't be hesitate to plan ahead. So with that said, let's take a look at some of these players now for this week. Let's start at the QB spot. Who do you like as a waiver wire pickup this week at QB?
Yeah, I like Kenny Pickett. We just saw him last night, and he looked, I thought, better than his points showed last night. 174 passing yards, had 32 rushing yards, and he actually did have 2 touchdowns that were dropped. So I think the points actually could have been more in that 19, 20-ish range, and they ended up only being around, I think, 12 or 13 points is in most leagues is what he ended up getting. So. I think he played a little bit better than his points showed. So, and this week he's going up against a bottom 10 Atlanta defense. And I thought the week before last he actually had a great game against Cincinnati, over 260 passing yards, and had a couple touchdown throws as well. And the Steelers, besides the 2 games against Baltimore, 3 of their final 5 games are against bottom 10 defenses in the league. They got Atlanta, of course, this week, and then Carolina in 2 weeks, and then they also have Las Vegas as well. So they're going to be playing some easier defenses coming up outside of the 2 against Baltimore, and I think Pickett's a good ad right now.
Yeah, I agree. That was a tough matchup last night, and I thought he played pretty well also, and he's kind of trending upwards. So that's good news for that Steelers offense. My pick is Mike White. Kind of stormed onto the scene last week, made quite the splash in his season debut as a starter for the Jets. He threw for 315 yards, 3 touchdowns without a turnover against a pretty good Bears defense, in my opinion. He's going to keep starting, and I think he's worth some spot starts in that offense. They have some good weapons at receiver with Elijah Moore, Garrett Wilson, Tyler Conklin as well. So I think that it wasn't really a fluke. I think he's going to have a couple good games along the way. The rest of the way, he's not a plug-and-play starter by any means, but definitely a guy that I think could be a good spot play the rest of the way because he showed his potential last week, had a huge game, and it was very encouraging for that entire Jets offense to see Mike White play so well. All right, let's move on to the running back spot now. Evan, who do you have at running back? A couple waiver wire ads for this week.
Yeah, I have another Steeler, and that's going to be Benny Snell. Najee Harris got hurt in the game last night, and Benny Snell ended up coming in for 12 rushes for 62 yards and had a touchdown as well. And also, like I was mentioning with Kenny Pickett, the Steelers got a bottom 10 Atlanta defense this week as well. I'd say maybe the only thing that could possibly hurt Snell is if their other running back comes back, and he could be featured in there. I believe he's questionable right now, but it looks like right now, though, Benny Snell should be the guy this week going forward. And, like I've mentioned before with Pickett, Pittsburgh has 3 of their final 5 games are against pretty bad defenses. So I think Benny Snell is a good ad, especially for this week.
Yeah, I agree with that. You want to keep an eye on the injury reports with Najee Harris. Who's your other pickup for this week?
The other pickup I have is Kyren Williams from the Los Angeles Rams. I think he ended up having more rushing attempts than Cam Akers, and he had 12 rushes in the last game last week. And with Henderson gone now for the Rams, I think Kyren Williams is the number 1 running back there. There's really not a lot of positives with the Rams right now, but Kyren Williams, I guess, has been a bit of a positive, at least, and it looks like he's going to be the go-to running back most of the way. Akers will be featured a little bit, but going forward, I'd say Kyren Williams is probably the ad to go with there in LA.
Yeah, I think so as well, especially with them not really playing for a whole lot at this point. They're falling out of playoff contention in a hurry, unfortunately, for any Rams fans out there.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on for my picks for the running back spot for this week. My first one is another one that is opened up because of injury, and that's Zonovan Knight. So he made his season debut last week. Michael Carter got banged up in that game. He ended up rushing 14 times for 69 yards, caught 3 passes for 34 yards. So we had 103 total yards in that game. He showed his potential as a 3-down back. Ty Johnson was also in the mix, but Knight was the better of the players in that game last week. Carter's banged up. Again, you're going to want to keep an eye on the injury reports. You never know what's going to happen here, but Carter could miss some time with his injury. It's an ankle injury, so it's something to definitely keep an eye on. And Knight's out there nearly every league, 99% of leagues he's available, owned in just 1%. So Knight's a guy that could end up helping fantasy teams next couple of weeks with Carter banged up. My other running back pick for this week is because of another injury, and that's Jermichael Hasty with Jacksonville. So Travis Etienne is apparently in pretty good shape with his foot injury, though he could have returned last week is what the story is. But you don't know what's going to happen during the week. Could stiffen up on him, could have more issues after the game. So it's definitely an injury to keep an eye on. And even if he plays Etienne, you could see maybe Hasty getting a few more carries, a few more chances as they want to manage the workload of Etienne. So I think Hasty could be in the mix. He had season high 12 carries last week, 28 yards. He's really a much better pass catcher than he is runner. 5 catches for 67 yards and a touchdown in that game last week. So again, he could end up getting more work even if Etienne plays. I think Hasty could be a guy to pick up, especially if you're an Etienne owner and you're not sure about his health status for this week. But either way, I think Hasty could be a factor the next couple weeks with the running back situation in Jacksonville, a little bit up in the air. All right, let's move on to that receiver spot now, Evan. Who do you like at receiver as a pickup for this week?
Yeah, I got DeAndre Carter from the Los Angeles Chargers. Like you say, like as you show there, he's 28% owned, and he actually continues to lead the Chargers in receiving, at least in receptions so far. 10 targets last week for 7 receptions and 73 yards, and he also had a touchdown as well in that game. And they're facing Las Vegas, who hasn't been good very much this year, especially defensively. So I like DeAndre Carter as an ad. It doesn't seem like Keenan Allen is really getting getting his footing back or anything too much yet, and DeAndre Carter continues to lead in the targets for the Chargers. So I think going forward, DeAndre Carter could be kind of the guy there, at least for the next couple of weeks there for LA.
Yeah, they're definitely. It looks like they're managing Keenan Allen's workload right now, so that's helping Carter get on the field a lot more. How about another ad at receiver?
Yeah, the other ad I have is Michael Gallup. He's kind of been very quiet this year. I think we all anticipated a little bit more out of him this year, but he was targeted 8 times last week and caught 63 yards. I think he'd be a pretty good flex option potentially this week. He is probably the third guy behind, CeeDee Lamb and then Dalton Schultz as well. There in Dallas, but Dak does seem to like to throw at least target Gallup a little bit more. So I like Michael Gallup to at least be an ad, and it looks like he's definitely moved ahead of Noah Brown, on the depth chart. So I like Gallup as a potential flex ad.
Yeah, Gallup returning from major injury takes some time. It seems like he's finally getting up to speed a little bit, kind of like Chris Godwin as well. He looks great after some early season hiccups for him. So maybe Gallup does get going, like you said. My pickup at receiver for this week, my pickups, I should say. My first one's Elijah Moore, another Jet. So I have 3 Jets that made the list this week. Kind of surprised everybody with the way they're playing this year. But Elijah Moore was a hot pick early in the year before the season, but he hasn't done much. Got dropped by a lot of owners, but he's still out there in about 67% of leagues on our site. Had a good game last week, 2 catches for 64 yards and a touchdown. That was his first touchdown of the season. Mike White obviously gave the whole passing game a big spark, some much needed life. So I think that's good news for Moore. Could end up getting a lot more work going forward. I know Garrett Wilson's is there, and he's played really well his rookie season, but Moore's super talented. I think they got to find ways to get him the ball more, and I think he's a good speculative ad for all of you out there looking for a receiver this week. My other one is Zay Jones. So he's made this list a couple times for me throughout the season, but he is still out there in 50% of the leagues. I'm kind of confused why. He's had a really good year. Last week, just a huge game, 11 catches, 145 yards. This was his second double-digit reception game of the season, so it's not really like last week was a fluke. He's been getting a lot of work. He has 19 receptions his last 2 games. I think if he's out there, he's a must-add in all leagues. He should be owned in nearly every league on our site, in my opinion, unless you're in a really shallow format. So go get Zay Jones if he's still out there. 50% of the leagues right now. All right, tight end, Evan, last position we're going to look at when it comes to players. So who's your tight end ad for this week?
I'm going to go with Austin Hooper for the Tennessee Titans. It's kind of been a while since we've heard about Austin Hooper. He a couple years ago, he was top, 7 or 8 tight end out there, but he has been targeted. It seems like a lot in the red zone. He hasn't gotten a lot of red zone opportunities, like at least catching it, but he has been targeted some, at least in the red zone. And last week he only had 4 receptions for 30 yards, not crazy numbers, but it is kind of acceptable, especially for the tight end position. And like I said, he has been targeted a lot in the red zone. Last week he was targeted twice, just kind of overthrew him a little bit or was unable to come up with it. But he is at least getting looks in the red zone, and I wouldn't be surprised if here eventually he doesn't get a touchdown.
He was another guy who was a popular sleeper pick for a lot of people and just didn't pan out early in the year. But like you said, he's been getting more work lately, so I like that as your pickup for this week. And my tight end is Hunter Henry with the New England Patriots. So he scored his second touchdown of the season last week. He had 3 catches for 63 yards. He has 50 or more yards 3 of 6 games. Patriots passing game's finally starting to come alive a little bit. Mac Jones probably played his best game as a pro last week. I think Henry's going to be a big factor in that passing game the rest of the season. He's still out there in 67% of leagues as well, so I think Henry is a good-looking ad for the rest of this season. All right, Evan, let's talk about a streaming defense now for this week. We like to talk about streaming defense to add every week, maybe that aren't owned in a lot of leagues, and you like to stream defenses, something I like to do as well. So give me your streaming defense for this week.
Yeah, I got the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle hasn't been particularly good defensively this year, but they are going up against the Rams, who have just been an injury mess this year. Obviously, the huge Super Bowl hangover, one of the worst Super Bowl hangovers I think we've ever seen. But yeah, Bryce Perkins will be the quarterback this week for the Rams, and it looks like Matthew Stafford's going to be out the rest of the year for the Rams. So I think this week especially is a great week to add Seattle going up against the Rams as a streaming defense this week. And they're banged up in almost every single position. So I think Seattle's a good go-to move defensively this week.
That's a good call. I like that one. Mine's Cleveland Browns. They're just 13.6% owned on our site. They held the Bucs to just 325 yards and 17 points last week. Played a really good game defensively. They've been getting a lot of sacks as well. They played the Texans. Another team's really a mess offensively, starting Kyle Allen, a quarterback. Their running game's a complete mess as well. Dameon Pierce has really struggled in a recent week. So I think Cleveland's a good one to pick up this week. I think they could get some sacks, some turnovers, hold the yards down as well. So I think that's a good pickup if you're looking for a streaming defense this week. All right, Evan. Thanks much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, Jeff. Yeah, it seems like it's a lot of guys we're adding because other guys are injured or a lot of teams are injured, banged up. So yeah, it's any team that you see that's playing a weak team that's injured or got anybody out, I think those are kind of the go-to moves going forward, at least in the last 2 weeks before the playoffs, because there are so many teams and player injuries that are going on. So
definitely agree with that. It's that time of year where guys are getting banged up, getting worn down a little bit. Rookies tend to wear down at the end of the year as well, not used to playing so much. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on going forward. Again, thanks, Evan. Really appreciate you joining me. Good luck in week 13.
Yep, you as well. Thanks for having me on.
All right, good luck to all of you out there in all of your week 13 games as well. I hope you have a lot of success. I hope you have a lot of success navigating that waiver wire as well this week. This has been Jeff Paur for RealTime Fantasy Sports. Have a great day.